Welcome, everybody. This is the last panel of Ask the Techie. This panel will be focused on emerging technologies. This is the fourth of four panels of Ask the Techie. This one, each with its own topic. If you have missed any of the discussions, I surely and strongly recommend that you schedule some times to see them. You won't regret it. My name is Marco Antonio Silva, and I'll be one of your co-hosts for this panel. With me is also Ricardo Fiel, the second co-host, and two amazing guests, Juanjo Carmena Ayasu and José Antonio Silva. I'll first of all just like to welcome both of them. José Antonio Silva is the R&D director for DevScope. Hi, Zeto. Thank you for accepting this, being part of this panel.
Thank you, Marco.
And Juanjo is the enterprise sales manager for GitHub for EMEA. Hello, Juanjo, and thank you for being part of this panel.
Thank you, Marco and Ricardo. Muito obrigado for the invite, and very happy to be here.
Amazing, Juanjo. Just so you're already noticing that we're doing this panel in English, but as before on the other panels, you saw that you could interact with us. You can use the live chat to do this. And if you want, you can do this in Portuguese as well. Me and Ricardo will gladly translate those questions for the panel, so no worries, okay? Any questions, any feedback? So this is your session as well. So this is a conversation that we'll be having, four of us, but we want to engage with you. So make sure to put in your questions, your suggestions, your topics, your ideas that you want to see discussed by this panel. Emerging tech is an immensely large topic, so prepare, grab some popcorn, hydrate, because it's going to be a long session if we want to cover the entire topic. So maybe, what do you say, Ricardo? Let's kick this off with the first topic.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Go for it.
Yeah, so thanks on my behalf as well for being here, José and Juanjo and Marco for setting this up. Emerging tech is something that sometimes is not really fully understood, what exactly that means, and also the impact that it can have on how companies not only build software and deliver software, but also need to organize themselves, right? And what that means in terms of how teams should be structured, the tools that should be adopted, the billing models that should be adopted, and so on. So that's something we're going to cover, hopefully, today. Shall we start with serverless?
That's a good starting point.
Right, so let's start with something. Serverless means there's no servers to manage anymore, right?
At least not mine.
Sorry?
At least not mine.
Not mine. So is that really what that means? That we are not managing servers anymore, or that the servers are run for someone else? Or does that even matter for this?
Good question. Want to start it, Zeto?
Yeah, actually, this is the topic I delivered last year during Building the Future.
That's true.
It was exactly around this new hype around what we were doing to support the serverless trend. And actually, this is not serverless. Actually, it is someone else servers. But what we are trying to do is obviously to focus on the code, what we want to run, not exactly how to run those servers or that infrastructure. And that is a very complex topic nowadays, because what is the computer, right? For the ones that built the cloud, the Azure, we know that the fabric is very, very big. It's a very complex system, and we are running code on the shoulders of giants, right? It's a small piece of code, but it's leveraging a lot of work and a lot of infrastructure that was built, and give us a lot of features and simplifies a lot of the effort. But said this way, it seems that it's easy. And I think that's the topic for today, is talking about how all these changes, what's the impact on way we work, the way we prepare our people, the way we deal with the new challenges, etc. It may be simple for one aspect, but we are building way more problems into the table.
It's going to be a good discussion at that point. Exactly. Right. What's shifting?
Yes.
What do you think, Juanjo?
Yeah, there are a couple of aspects here that are super important. One is the automation, the idea of automation. No? So it's funny, and I was joking with someone the other day how much the IT sector, so all the techies here, we have automated everyone else, right? So we built e-commerce, and then we automated the way people is purchasing things. We built the CRM, and then we automated the way the sellers, non-technical people mostly, go like manage their relationships. And then at some point, we see how we are automating ourselves. We are automating the way we are managing the applications, the deployment and the operations of those applications, right? And it's really important in that sense, because the same level of change and disruption that you see in e-commerce versus a traditional shop, you see in the operations team when they see that many of the things that they used to do by themselves with their own hands is now happening automatically, right? Mm-hmm. And it has and I really like the way Jose Antonio was positioning this, because at the end is, what is the impact of this on people? And I was in a customer meeting this morning, when the Microsoft GM technical person was telling the customer, we don't have a traditional ops team anymore for that particular environment. And then the customer remained silent for 20 seconds, like they were trying to understand what that means. There is a trick on that, right? So you change the name for the ops team. No, there is no ops team. The developers do that. It's like, what? So it was and then what happened, right? So there was a very large conversation. I want to start with that now, telling you a conversation that happened this morning. Mm-hmm. But the impact on people is very, very large sometimes. So it's something that really can't be like letting go in a very light way.
Love that topic, and going back again to you, Juan, and doing the thing around the inverse way. You just brought out a great topic. Is how is this change? It's more than just technical change. It's a cultural change. So this emerging tech that we're talking about, like serverless and the other ones that you probably gonna approach on this talk, it's very much around culture. And we had this conversation around principles like DevOps and stuff like that coming up in the past, but it was and about the fact that DevOps is a lot about people and culture more than tools and technology. But I think technology is coming up to the point where it's even these new changes in architecture, in the way that you design your applications, are changing the way that you see the team and how you see each other's contribution to getting that stuff to production. And you're talking about automation, and I'm thinking about who manages automation. How's the skill set for the new generation of developers that need not to think about only code, but how to instrument that code in a way that it will be managed by themselves probably, or by machines, and I think this is serverless has unlocked a lot of this potential, because it's really small bits of code that you just putting out there, and the sum of all of it will be your application, and not the other way around. So how do you see this cultural change for teams and even for the next generation. We have many of the people that are listening in probably are academics and students that are preparing or being prepared for the next generation, for this emerging tech, for this new industry that you're talking here. So how do you see this? How does this change?
Yeah, so it's a very funny sentence in the market that most people doesn't really realize what it means, which is IT as code. And it's like 3 words, but it has a whole world inside, because when you say IT as code means that for doing IT, you need to you have to be able to code, because your IT is code. So if you want to manage IT, you must be able to code. On the other side, you may be very happy because you're a coder in a traditional environment, and you are used to develop your whatever language, and you deploy, and you're used to zip this or put this on the Git repo and forget about that. And then suddenly someone is going to tell you, no, man or girl or whoever, this is now IT as code. So you start thinking on reliability with your code.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the your level of responsibilities and accountabilities are much higher, because now this is going to go in production after a set of tests that you are responsible to develop by itself. And then you can break it, really. So it's really changing. And this looks like, well, for many people, because I tell this very often, people is looking at me like, oh yes, that is a dream. This is really, yeah, that would be nice. Or maybe this will happen one day, whatever. Forget about that. Because when you look at the disruptors, the people that is disrupting every industry, the fintech companies disrupting banking, the voice IP, internet voice companies disrupting telco, Airbnb, Uber, you name it. The ones that are disrupting all the industries, they are working today like this.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very interesting conversation by someone in the travel industry that was talking about testing, and they were saying that they perform 10,000 individual tests per day. So they are deploying that amount of times per day. And it's happening today. So you go there to buy tickets for traveling to your holidays when they finally resume traveling, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that is happening today. And what I am telling everyone is that this is a strategic advantage for those companies, because they can react quicker, they can deploy quicker, they can bring value to their customers much quicker. So it is no longer a wish, it is reality. And the people that is not doing that is going to have a problem at some point. So this is what I have. When you look at the teams, this means also that, at least in many companies we see, they are reorganizing the teams. So they used to do functional, like a pipeline. So you have developers, people the analysts, the developers, the knobs, and whatever. Now you see that there is a different organization that brings a full project into pieces, and then you have the different function parts, people bringing the functional knowledge into that small team for a part of the full application. And that really make a change in the way you create. And in reality, in my mind, this is DevOps, right?
Exactly.
It's not the tool, right? It's the way you work with the people that is in different environments. And let me say one more thing, because I tend to talk too much, so please stop me.
Okay.
Which is, when you see the way the disruptors are working, the main strategic difference is that they're bringing their business stakeholders into those teams. So when they're creating this new application or this new part of the website that is providing some service, they bring the product manager, and they bring the people that is working with the telemetry for that specific item, and it's all together in the thinking. So they may find their solution that is right for their users quicker than anyone else. And this is why they have a competitive advantage regarding someone that is doing traditional IT, right? So that's what they call digital transformation at the end,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it is the level of impact that I see this having on the like not only on the IT industry, but on the world as we know it. Okay.
Great message.
I have gone very far.
Great message, Juanjo. And Zeto, tell me, and I know that you've been to this point. I think you must have a strong opinion because you've been also very focused in that DevScope in the skilling part and how to get those talents in the company. So and also changing internally. So I remember many conversations around DevOps with you. So I can imagine that you have a lot to contribute on that. So what's your thoughts?
Well, what I've seen is, as Juanjo was explaining, there's a lot of more declarative code that is going on, and that code is not written on any universal language, right? So we don't learn like in the 90s Java for everything, right? we live in a very different world, and there's a lot of languages. There's a lot of domain languages that were created just for specific things, and as he was saying, for example, for testing, we see a lot of specification languages that are very useful for the domain user to participate on those 10,000 tests that they have to run every day. These are not, they don't need to be coded by developers. They should be coded by people that actually understand the business need, the scenario, the context, the domain, right? And that is one part of the spectrum. The other one, even on the developers, and because some of them are writing code more for the infrastructure, some of them are writing code more for the UIs, more for the workflows. So there's a lot of languages that are better suited for each one of those scenarios, and that puts a challenge for training for growing people, right? Because they are a strong senior developer on a specific language. They don't want to go learn scripting or any other thing, right? You know the problem.
Yeah.
So that's why they keep calling me the PowerShell guy, because I end up asking them, why not a couple of lines of PowerShell instead of complicating, right? And sometimes we need those questions in the team to challenge the status quo and trying to do things in a more appropriate way for each scenario. So we shouldn't use the same hammer for everything, right?
It's very human, that one, right? Yeah. It's you're also always trying to be inside your box because you're comfortable in your box, but sometimes, especially in the ever-changing world, you need to at least look outside the box sometimes.
Yeah, I know it's easy for developers to accept frameworks because they see frameworks as a way of accelerating work, being more productive, tools to make them more productive. But the challenge here is actually creating the right language to help them write code and write less bugs, right? So the challenge for us today may be writing less code, because code is not only value. Code can be a liability. Code can be risk, and if we start measuring productivity by the number of lines of code, we are doing it completely wrong, right? Probably the other way around.
But
so
I know of someone who is some actually more than one.
Lines of codes per minute, right?
Yeah. So
you want to have less code, not more code.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So writing or preparing people to participate in these more complex systems, it's a challenge. It's a cultural challenge. We need to understand why they decide to use each component or tool or whatever, and try to understand how that fits in the bigger picture. Maintainability is a big challenge nowadays. This code won't be running for the next week demo. This code will be running for the next 10 years. So we better do something that is maintainable by the next guy that will have to fix this. I know we are perfect writing our first line of code, of course, but sometimes they need to improve it, and that's why sometimes we need to pick someone else's code and correct it or improve it, whatever. So that's a challenge. That's an issue we have with training, with motivation, and the way we create challenges in a team to challenge those dogmas. And sometimes it can be done with training others, giving them a challenge to research on a new topic, to create an MVP or a proof or something like that that can give them the opportunity and the time to try to learn a new skill and then share it with colleagues. Yeah, but that's a good topic.
For sure, for sure. Go, Ricardo.
And in that context, there's actually a very, very good question in the audience from Susanna. And she's asking, but aren't there languages more adaptable to different use cases, such as Python, which is great for web and great for analytics, but isn't spreading the structure into several languages a harder situation to manage?
Yep.
I have my opinion because I've led teams that have decided to experiment with different languages and platforms and clouds and so on. But let's hear it from you. Now let's go the other way around now. So Jose, you were on the topic, and then we go to Rafa.
It's actually much easier nowadays to work with that because we now have containers, right? And containers give us this isolation level that allows for everything, right? Allows for a subteam to still use an older framework, an older version of a dependency. And actually, containers were very useful for Python, as what Susanna is. Environments in Python are a mess, and so we need that.
That's so true.
Exactly.
So I'm not worried anymore about the proliferation of different languages on a team, as long as it's actually more productive to the team. So what I don't want to see on a team is someone trying to port code from one language to another just because they want to use another framework, right? So, there's a perfect project in Java, but I don't want to use Java, so I want to port it to .NET first to use it on my project. No, you should try to use that code as is, launch it on a Docker container, put it on a microservice, encapsulate it some way, and use that first, and try to first solve the problem. And then if you need to optimize for something, for example, the footprint, the memory impact, whatever, maybe you will need to optimize that specific microservice. That's not a problem anymore. I think containers and Kubernetes has brought us to a new way of dealing with different languages, different frameworks, different versions of the same framework on the same team.
Yeah. And even different versions of the same application.
Yeah.
Side by side. So Juanjo, would be really good to hear you. Sorry, Seto?
Backward and forward compatibility.
Yeah. Exactly.
If you publish a web service, you better support it. Even for the future.
There's some good stories around things like doing a small change. Juanjo, on this topic, DevOps is critical, obviously, for teams who may be adopting different platforms, technologies, languages, and so on and so forth. So how do you see that, and how does DevOps play a critical role in making sure that this is not an issue?
Yeah, so it's all going in parallel and happening at the same time. So as Seto was saying, it's a move to containers, Kubernetes, and PaaS services in general. So you see people working more and more with that. And this allows you to really work with microservices, which was a trend that happened before that, but it was kind of in a break state until we had a proper platform to run that. That means you can really isolate things from each other, right? You can really have a project that is optimized this way, another project that is optimized that way. And this has an effect on people. And the effect on people is that people can really work on like, you don't really have this plan like 7 years from now that you need to develop in the same language, and you have this like centralized planning that will happen for so many years, because as soon as you want to change this centralized planning in a waterfall project into something else, you're killed. It's not just no way to go back, right? With this new idea, you can really work with a smaller, like, because you have isolation in different items, you can really have a different pace with different items. And then if you try to manage that with a waterfall process, your dev, you need to go to a different environment, which is DevOps. And DevOps kind of allows you to go quick on those processes. And it's all supporting, all the pieces are supporting each other. So containers, Kubernetes is supported by is supporting the microservices environment. And DevOps is the human change that needs to happen to manage properly all those other, all the other parts of the environment, right? It is very, very tight. Also, I think it's a reflection on things that make people work better in a way. So the way you, like, I think people is happier when you can learn things and you are learning things all the time, right? For developers, this is particularly important. When I started my career, I remember someone saying a developer is someone that is always starting something and someone every time learning something, right? That is the definition of a developer. And then this evolution of languages will come naturally. And when you look at the productivity of the people, what is more productive, to change to another language that is optimized for something, or do level 429 Java versus the 428 that you knew before? I think the new languages allow for more experimentation, for new ideas, for new tries, because we are reducing this to microservices. It allows you to test in a smaller environment, and then everything goes faster and more agile, and really allows people to be more, like, with more satisfaction, because it's learning more on the job, right? So it all goes together in my opinion.
Amazing, and I think my time as an architect, solution architect, got me a lot of those type of problems that, okay, I need to put this part of the application working with the other part of the application, and well, I decided to use this framework and this let's say .NET framework with C#, and okay, this other part, I had this amazing open source type project that's in Java for let's say, okay, my environment, because it's a monolithic environment, it's not going to be very well suited to have a part of Java running with another part in .NET, and how I'm going to put these two together. And there are some patterns that people started thinking about, how to create some interoperability between those languages and others. But I think that exploded when we start thinking about the new architecture, the modern architectures, let's say event-driven design, for instance, in microservices. And I think that's also a paradigm shift in terms of how you build the applications, like we were talking about, how you think it, and how you reuse components, like we're talking about as well. But also, I think it opened for new principles of reliability, resilience, and other things that were, you need to design for those, and we're very easy now in a fully microservice, fully domain-specific segmented application, and you think, how is it reliable? And you think about different operations going through different infrastructures in different ways, and you say, okay, if I have a problem in the deployment of this small piece, it doesn't affect the whole. Okay, may affect some of the workflows, but not the whole. And this is by design. And for sure, for us to design those applications beforehand, to have this level of isolation and high availability, it was a principle that was tough. And I would love to hear your thoughts, Juanjo, on this paradigm shift and how things started, new architectures and new solutions change the way that we build software for developers, for and even for the way that we deploy them and everything. So it's by design, right? And this is good. There's other pains, but right, but some of them are not the same.
Yeah, and I remember first time I was in a public sector customer in a ministry in Spain, my country, and I was telling them about this process in Netflix that is kind of killing machines randomly, and how they have this monkey killing the machines all the time to make sure that their code was resilient and the application was resilient. So they were not depending on any single server. And their face, man, was something you cannot imagine, because it was so countercultural for them. It was so different and so hard to believe that it was really difficult for them to really do that bridge, that mental bridge, to understand that they can build software in a different way, right? The same happened with the data centers. When Azure started, we very quickly had a question about when are you going to be tier 5? And I was like, we're never going to be tier 5. It doesn't matter anymore. The people in front of me was like, no way. How do you manage reliability? We say we manage reliability with good architecture, with software, with the right approach to things that are much better than like praying that the hardware part is not broken, right? So because the hardware part will break, and we will buy cheap hardware just to allow it to break, right? So at the end, it changes to the architecture side, the architecture conversation, to be smarter in the way you see the architecture from above, and you make sure that it is always resilient, whatever it happens, right? And it is a difficult conversation when you end up in that room with people that has a traditional mentality. It is not something you're going to convince them to change in just one meeting. They really need to experiment. And there is always technical debt, right? Always have to pay the technical debt. It's interesting because questions are like, okay, so how are you going to manage complexity? How are you going to manage complexity of the technical debt when you are having 4 languages? And I understand it's a very good question, but it is not much worse than having to manage 4 versions of Java or 4 versions of .NET in your portfolio of applications, right? And I've seen that in the past in my different conversations with customers in the different projects that I've been involved in, right?
For sure. And what are your thoughts also, Zeto, on this technical debt that you need to pay, and how the architecture can help or not in solving this?
Isolation allow us to separate things. We know the impact of starting to use distributed systems, and we start talking here about the bridging between code and sending messages from one part of the code to the other. At the end, if the developer doesn't know what he's doing, he will probably end up doing the same mistakes. Right. Marshalling of lots of data between different systems, and that all of that has impact on the overall performance of the system. So if we're doing RPC kind of calls, or if we are doing event-driven with queues, etc., we may have the same problems, because even the queues will have some message limits, and they are not the best place to put a lot of information just to send from one process to the other. So having the proper architecture, understanding what people are doing, is probably more important than having the most incredible tool that does everything. We had that experience with adding proxies to code, to web services, and it was so easy that people were not understanding what was going on. And this problem is a problem if you're running on the same machine and you're doing inter-process communication this way. But if you start putting this on a distributed data center with code running on-prem, code running on a vehicle, code running on an airplane, or code running on several data centers, all of these problems may become a very big problem. And traffic is also a cost. It's not only CPU, right? So we pay outbound traffic on Azure and on any other data center, and that's an issue. If we don't understand what we are doing, we may be paying lots of money just to send code or data from one place to the other. It's very easy, for example, to use a GPU on a specific data center, but don't forget where you left the data, because if you're doing training on terabytes of data and you have the GPUs rented on another place of the world, you're gonna pay more for the traffic than for the GPU. So people need to understand what they are doing, right? And that's the challenge. And the new topic here we start discussing now is the hybrid. I think hybrid is actually a huge challenge for us. Maybe we've been enjoying a lot the Azure centralization, right? But that's not all, right? We have a lot of computation going to the edge now, and companies they cannot move some things to the public cloud. So hybrid is here. I don't think we will be able to move everything to Azure. I know for Microsoft it would be easier, but actually I think Microsoft is the player that understands the importance of hybrid, right? Some other players like Salesforce or Google, they are way more central oriented, right? Mm-hmm. Running on their servers, everything, the data on their servers. I think Microsoft has an important legacy with lots of corporate customers that they are running their business, right? And they need to keep those compliance issues, those scenarios that they implemented that are very expensive and they are running dependent on local resources. They need to run locally. And today, I think we may be on the edge of starting to use the same technologies that we are using on the cloud, start to using them on the edge. And that's not impossible. I think Kubernetes and containers, they can run anywhere. We are not used to yet to thinking about Kubernetes, for example, on the edge. One of the examples I read about the other day was the Americans are running the Kubernetes on F-16 flight airplanes, right? But they are not running one cluster on the airplane offline. They are running 3 clusters on each airplane. So we don't think of clusters that way, right? This is supposed to be something that it's difficult to manage, big, whatever, right? And if they're running those on this real-time, very intense scenarios, maybe we will see them running on our cars, on our smartphones, on our smartwatches, whatever, yeah. Right? In our houses. So those fabrics from the cloud probably are coming, right? And they will run anywhere. And that's good, because that will give us a lot of isolation to allow us to run those specific runtimes or specific dependencies on the same cluster without any issues. One of the questions here in the group was again from Susanna. She was asking about the problem of managing the dependencies and how the dependencies may crash those scenarios. And this is where DevOps is very important. And if Susanna, if you're working on machine learning, you should take a look at MLOps and all the trend around creating those pipelines for data science also. So if you're running a proper DevOps pipeline, you probably can detect those issues much easier because they will test the dependencies, they will update the dependencies, and you will discover the problems much easier. The dependency management is becoming really critical. We have attacks now on the supply chain, right? So that's a trend now in security. So attacking a supplier means attacking a package, for example, that you are including on your pipeline. So you must have proper DevOps stages in your pipeline to make sure that you're testing for those vulnerabilities and you are getting the right versions of your dependencies. It's very easy to inject a virus that way.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, thanks, Joseph, for introducing the hybrid topic. I think we mentioned the word here that actually solves everything we've been talking about, right? And that's Kubernetes. I mean, if you use Kubernetes, if an F-16 uses Kubernetes, I mean, it's got to be right? But jokes aside, we have seen, and I've been involved firsthand across Western Europe, we have seen an exponential amount of Kubernetes adoption, whether from small companies, huge companies. Every single industry is adopting Kubernetes, whether in a public cloud or hybrid. And precisely because it solves a lot of the stuff that we are talking about, right? It doesn't solve all problems in the world, but it does solve a lot of the stuff that we are talking about. So it brings this abstraction of infrastructure. So finally, developer teams and operation teams can work as one in a common platform, regardless of that where that's hosted, right? It can be Azure, other clouds, on-prem, and so on and so forth. In the hybrid story, one thing that Microsoft have been investing a lot is in a product called Azure Arc. So Arc brings the Azure control plane, so security, role-based access control, monitoring, and so on, to workloads running on-prem or other clouds, but also brings the possibility to deploy managed data services from Azure and from Microsoft on-prem or in other clouds, as long as there is a Kubernetes cluster, right? So it's that important. And I usually say to partners, you don't need to go into Kubernetes, but you should at least be looking at Kubernetes, whether from an infrastructure perspective, as you may need to create a cluster, or for how to deploy an application into Kubernetes. And that's when it comes sooner or later to every single kind of partner. So starting with you again, Jose, how do you see the role of something like Arc and unifying tools and processes across hybrid and cloud and edge, and how does it make everyone's lives easier when they want to go hybrid?
Yeah. So I'm a fan of this topic, of course, and this has been part of my work recently, and I really believe that having these federations of clusters working together it's huge, right? We can do a lot of things once we understand how to reuse and connect these distributed systems and work on top of them in our scenarios, from data science to even web applications, whatever. There's a lot of scenarios where we should be using this kind of technology. Of course, for someone that already built or I won't say built, I would say installed Kubernetes. They know that it's a pain. Running Kubernetes by itself from bare metal, it's very pain. It's a pain, of course. It's much easier to go to Azure and learn to use Kubernetes on Azure Kubernetes services. And running all of these clusters at the same time, it's even worse. So having the same kind of API to run all of them at the same time, it's a very compelling feature. So Azure Arc is actually a way of connecting your cluster to Azure, and then you can apply the same things from the Azure backplane. And one of those things, and we've been talking a lot about DevOps, one of those things is using a convention called GitOps. So we can declare our infrastructure on Git, and Azure Arc will take care of triggering those changes into the cluster. One of the changes that this will imply to users or to developers is that now they have the power to declare their software in a different way. In the past, we may have to deploy a tool, and then we have to buy a lot of tools to monitor, to send alerts, to notify on-call engineers, wherever. We need to put a lot of tools on top of this. What is changing now with this trend is developers are able to declare how their containers are supposed to be monitored, how the infrastructure can understand if the container is alive, is ready, is dying, it needs a recycle, whatever. And when the developer starts to understand this, they are actually coding the infrastructure of monitorization and alerting into their declarative configurations. And this is amazing. We are letting Kubernetes take care of recycling our workloads, launching, scaling the number of pods, and all of this is being done automatically by a free tool. It's amazing. So Azure is bringing a level of federation on top of this, and this simplifies a lot of the complex scenarios we will be building in the next years. I don't see any other way of managing 300 Kubernetes clusters, right, Ricardo?
Oh yeah, that's true. It was super simple with Arc. And Juanjo, you're building on top of this, one of the DevOps principles, and specifically with GitHub being very, very good there, is that you can work with on-prem just like you work with cloud, and you know it applies the same practices. So what's your vision on this, and can you elaborate a bit there?
Yeah, I was about to say a joke before. You said you can
Go ahead.
You may not look into, like, you may not learn Kubernetes if, and you said something else, but I was thinking you may not look into Kubernetes if you are retiring next month, right? It's the best argument for not looking into Kubernetes.
Yeah, we'll spare you the trouble of having to go through.
I know. I've been with you with some of those. The point is, from our point of view, there are a few things that are relevant. One is the supply chain. Like, first of all, is the IT as code. Like, for us, GitHub is the bigger repository for code in the world. So this is very impactful. We see the many organizations, particularly Microsoft in Western Europe, that we know that well, that they are creating the adoption framework. They are creating this deployment they call enterprise scale. So you want to deploy SAP on Azure, you go to the repo, you clone the repo, you change a few file codes with ARM templates, you click on something, and then you deploy an SAP environment on Azure like that. And then you bring the person that was deploying SAP before, and it's like unbelievable, right? It's not something you can really have in your mind. Second topic from that is super important is you have the different repos with all the dependencies, and I was looking at that, and I think the last version of the studies we're running in GitHub.com in the enterprise versions that 95% of the enterprise repos are pointing to some open source. So have a dependency that is in the open source realm, and this is to the point where these dependencies, this supply chain is that important because you are allowing third parties to have this code in your code, and this is super important. And we are very focused on that. We see that as a very large problem, and we have a set of responsibility to support our customers to fix that with advanced security. And then you have the need for a good build engine, right? So you have the code, you have the Kubernetes platform, so you finally built it, right? You deploy it on Azure or whatever. You went the long route of deploying on your own servers, right? And then you need to really take all those dependencies and build your application and deploy. And many people is using tools that require you to have root access, which is not good. So we are working on that to make like more reasonable and have a situation and a tooling that allows you to deploy the proper way, right? And deploying also is scriptable, so you can script your deployments, so you can have intelligence on the way you deploy, not only on the way you operate your application. So you automate the full environment. This is when you can start repeating and really be very, very fast on the way you manage that application. So for us, it's super important. This is core to our business, and it's one of the some of the topics that we're putting more attention to if you read that our documentation and announcements.
Makes the entire sense, especially given that more and more we want to be agile, we want to be faster to create value, and we've been talking about infrastructure as code, and Juan, I love the idea because even the deployment is not infrastructure, is not code, but it is code. It's something that you have a YAML or especially when you're talking about Kubernetes, we're talking about a lot of code that is configuration. So configuration is code, infrastructure is code, everything is code, and even the pipeline is code. So if you're not thinking about learning development after this first half of this talk, then you probably should rethink your principle around how code and how some level of knowledge around development is probably key in this emerging tech future. We got halfway almost to our conversation. Just letting you know, love the questions, love the engagement. So guys, keep them coming. This is always best if we answer your questions. We can keep talking. The panel is very happy to keep talking, so no worries. But if you have questions, if you have topics you want to approach the panel, feel free to do them. So we are going to do a short break now, but the panel will continue exactly the same. So don't go anywhere. Take the advantage of this time because it's grab a snack. It's almost 5 p.m. Here in Lisbon. So maybe grab a snack, go hydrate a little bit. This conversation has been intense, but it's going to keep on getting intense. There's a lot more topics for us to cover. So stay there. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after a short, almost 10-minute break. Okay. See you in a bit, guys.
See you.
See you. Thank you.
in the chat window of the session. So please do keep that machine learning, AI, and data in general. So I want to start there. When we talk about machine learning, and we ended this first part with Kubernetes and the role that it's playing, having in hybrid scenarios, and also touching DevOps and so on. One of the scenarios that I've seen a higher adoption is precisely machine learning ops, so ML ops, or the DevOps for machine learning, right? Because it brings the DevOps practices and culture and tooling to that developers traditionally use also to data scientists. And this way, training and retraining models and doing things like A/B testing in machine learning models, monitoring those models, and then feeding that back into the planning stage becomes fully automated, and data science teams are able to actually ship the ML much faster, and also collaborate much better with their developer counterparts. What I have seen firsthand, and this has been for the last year and a half, probably a bit more, is containers and Kubernetes do play a critical role in this thing, right? So let me start with Shazay now. MLOps, DevOps, containers, edge, hybrid, cloud computing, GPUs, and so on and so forth. But let's start with MLOps. In your opinion, why are more mature teams in AI and data science really adopting MLOps in production scenarios?
Yeah, thank you, Ricardo. Actually, I like to talk about this and to follow up also on Susanna comments here about why people are moving and data and all the implications of having data on their desktops. If we are worried about personally identifiable information, GDPR, etc. All those scenarios end up creating constraints to the more mature teams. And what we try to do in those scenarios is to separate what is running locally and what you can run remotely. Sometimes it's because of the governance of the data, what you can do remotely. Sometimes it's because you don't have the hardware capacity, GPU or data storage to run those trainings locally. So, and that's the point where it's easy to move people to a scenario where they are working on remote kernels. So the tool here, as we are talking about Kubernetes in the past hour, the tool here is Jupyter and notebooks, right? So once a data scientist discovers the power of notebooks, everything changes, because you start working on a declarative model, and once again you have a runnable code, and that code can run on any kernel, local or remote. And if we divide the data between what you can take with you for research, local work or tests, or to improve your scripts, what you can bring locally to do quick data quality or scrambling of data, whatever, you can create these sanitized versions of your data set that can be published for the local development or for a public contest, for example, a Kaggle contest where teams are working against each other. In these scenarios, the private data set is probably way better, bigger, and with way more quality than the one that is available for the local development. And that's not a problem. That's actually an advantage, because you can run your notebook remotely, and that notebook can be connected to the kernel that has the proper hardware, the proper GPUs, the memory, and the full data set that you want to run there. So here you have lots of advantages. You can work locally and improve your script, and you can send the job to a data center somewhere else. So you have your machine free to keep working, to keep doing other things. You're not using your local device, for example, and wait 6 hours for a training to complete, right? You want to do other things, and having the possibility to run these kernels remotely, it's amazing. And most of these kernels will be running actually on Kubernetes, because that's the way nowadays to isolate those environments and put several customers, for example, several containers running on the same hardware, right? I know you wanted me to show that Kubernetes is also for data scientists. It is. You're right. You're right. I know, Ricardo.
It's not for everything.
Yeah, but it's also very important.
It's very,
yeah.
But it's very good for that scenario. Well, how do you see this from an MLOps perspective?
Yeah, I think some of the questions and some of the problems are kind of similar to the ones we discussed before. So you are thinking on typing your models on your computer and then sending them to the cloud to execute and this is not very different in that regard. The logic in the model obviously is very different, but the process, the workflow is not that different from a developer team in general, right? So there is a part of this that is related to how you collaborate and improve the model. And you will have many people doing that in GitHub with Python or R or any other language like this, and you create your pull request and you have everything documented. You can search, you have the issues to document. And we have many people like accumulating their knowledge, like shared knowledge on GitHub and their code on GitHub to really improve it and to be able to create branches and to try things and test things and progress on the way you manage. And also you see more and more people that is using the build tools like GitHub Actions or others to deploy that, to automate the deployment of those into the cloud. And in that one, and there was a question about that, there is always a problem with versioning to make sure you have the latest version, that you don't have any, you're not compromised on the security on the libraries you're using. And this is a shared problem with the rest of the development environments. And we see that happening all the time. And we have the tools to manage that. And also you have the deployment itself. And because of Kubernetes, again, this is something that you can do on the cloud in the proper way, right? So you got the same level of isolation, the same level of independency. You can have like 4 different versions in parallel to see which one is better. And you enjoy having like a pay-per-use, and we didn't talk about that, but that pay-per-minute or pay-per-second environment where you are just paying for the models, for the training, for the exact amount of compute you are using. You don't have to go to your manager or to the director of the lab to really request for like 20 servers with all the cost it implies, and then like put yourself in a like jump suite to go build those into the racks. You can just use them because they're there, and then you can like go much faster in a sense. So that is the I think interesting part of this is you can leverage all the good practices from the development world and use that in your ML environment, including some of the tools like Kubernetes or GitHub, and you can really go faster and have a like more productive like life on that environment.
Makes all sense, Juanjo. And I love the concept because it's we've been talking about how things are diverging, right, in terms of technology and languages, and everything is heterogeneous and you can run anything. But then we've been truly talking about convergence in terms of how you do things, how you architect things, and it doesn't matter if you're building complex tier one applications, or you're building ML models, or you're building AI, deep learning, really strong processes there. So it's all about reusing the same principles, and I love that statement. Says that concept. So thank you for sharing that. And bridging to as we were talking about ML and AI, there was a talk about AI, a panel just around AI, but we didn't talk about this part, because I think the emerging AI is an emerging tech. Well, ML is emerging tech, and I in my podcast some time ago, we were talking, just saying, okay, but in truth, this is mid-80s type tech, so it's calling emerging tech today, but the definition of AI was as old as computers are. So it's a very old emerging tech, let's say it like this, but it's becoming immersed in a lot of our applications. And I would love to hear your thoughts, Juanjo, on how this is creating things like the build process that we were talking about on automation and everything. And I know that GitHub is really strong on this, how things like security concerns, things like monitoring, and all of this today. We're talking about ML, we're talking about AI embedded in these tools, and people sometimes they don't realize this. And I would love to hear your thoughts on how AI is changing the way we build and developers work in their IDEs and source repository and everything.
Yeah, so it's affecting in so many ways, right? It's all around. So first of all, now Azure and every other provider, you see these AI components that are pre-built, so you can just bring them, almost drag and drop into your application, right? So that's first, and it's super easy. You don't need to do really ML to incorporate AI on your application. I was joking about like different bots that we would like to see built in our mobile devices, like things that would be funny to be able to ask the phone about real life, and there are hundreds of them. And when you put this into any application, there is some usage for someone that will want to make a question to your application using voice. That's happening all the time, right? And this is first, that this is easy, and it's something that if you're not doing as a developer, I don't know what you're up to. I like, this is completely. And the other thing that is funny also is that you can put this on premises, on the edge, by using, you know what, Kubernetes. So you can run these AI pre-configured models on Kubernetes running on your own data center, or maybe on your fighter plane, or whatever you're building, right? Your car, whatever. So that's there. It's something you can start using tomorrow. Then you can make this evolve into something much more complex, because at the end, you see many different tools today that are considering that code is data. The first one, we built one called GitHub Advanced Security, where you can create queries to look for vulnerabilities on your code. And it's kind of, we call this code QL, and it is like a SQL kind of queries that you can run to look for vulnerabilities on your code. And we see people that suddenly discover like maybe thousands of vulnerabilities that were hidden somewhere in the code that were written, because you write the query and you run the query in the whole repo, and then something that was written 10 years ago pops up, and then you see something that you were not waiting to see, right? So this is one, this is important, and you can start doing that on top of, you can start using AI and ML on top of the code, because it's data, or even more important, you can start using that on the telemetry for your applications. And then you can start to see really interesting things, because you see the user behavior. Users are never doing what you are assuming them they're going to do. They're going to do some new things, and there are some things you're expecting them to do they will not do, and that's life. And then when you start doing AI on top of the telemetry, on the logs on the applications you're building, and you can look at the click stream in a way, so the user behavior, or you can look at the business processes that are on top of that. So you can model your business process, and you can start to see how it goes in different applications, and you can start doing ML or big data on top of those different parts of the process and the data that is coming out of the process, and it becomes really interesting because you start to see trends you could not see before, and you can start inferring behavior you couldn't before. And I'm going to tell you a very well-known secret. If you're using a bank, they're doing that to know that your card transaction is good and not done by someone evil, right? Mm-hmm. Or if you may have seen these advertisements on the web, or someone that is doing that on the way people is typing on the computer. Mm-hmm. This is happening today, and this is something you can start looking at your own applications. And the fact that both the deployment and the applications and the code is data, and data is code, you can start using those concepts to start doing AI on top of every one of those data sets, and really solve problems that look like impossible to solve some years ago.
Love the concept, and well, AI and ML is a very dear topic to me, and the way that it became paramount in every aspect of application development, and even for testing and everything else. I remember test-driven development being a thing that you basically were writing code and for every single scenario and every type of input. And today you're thinking about, I couldn't even think about half the things that you could put ML just crossing those dots and covering everything. So today is a very different paradigm. So this emerging tech is more than just the Kubernetes and the platforms or even the languages that we're talking about. This is the way that we work and the tooling that today exists to do the same things that we did in the past. And I can imagine and I would love to hear your thoughts on that, Zeta, because I can imagine the having a team or managing a team that today writes codes, unit codes by hand or something like that. It would be very, very inefficient, right?
Yeah, but we are using a lot of AI components sometimes without even noticing. For example, it's very common on bot frameworks, right? People are developing bots; they don't know anything about language understanding, right? And there's a lot of AI going there. We are just giving them examples, so we program by examples, and those examples create the inference models to understand the intentions. So it's a kind of programming where you are actually feeding examples into the machine, and the machine will create the code for you. And if we go back to the discussion of the MLOps and the pipelines there, when we are creating a new inference engine for something, for example, the credit card rating, if the transaction is a good transaction or if it's not a good transaction, if we are training something for a model like that, at the end, we are going to deploy a binary model that will be used by the production team for another application, for a mobile application, for a data center, whatever. And that specific version of the model that we train is a versioned code, actually, because we can see that as a piece of code. We can see that as a package. And if we think that if we use this DevOps paradigm here and the developer flow, actually the data scientist is contributing with something that is a pipeline to calculate that model, but it doesn't end there, because for the next years the data teams will be feeding new examples into the data set that is used for training. So we are always retraining and we are always recreating the latest model. And if in AI the data is actually the source code, so what we are starting to do is we are versioning our data sets. We are looking at our data sets as versions. So we do training for invoices. You know that we have this background on inferring invoices, paper invoices, and what is happening is we are always fitting with new examples. There's new layouts for invoices. There's new concepts being used in the text, in the language, whatever, and we have to retrain this every time. So every time we have a new example that is not working, we are actually fitting it into a data set that will help the next build to improve the model. And this is a continuous thing. So we will keep using the data scientist's notebook as a build pipeline, and the code is actually the data, not the notebook, right? The notebook is just how you align that data, and then the rest will be built by the ML tools. I was saying the example of Luis, but there are others. We sometimes we don't see them. For example, when we are using the mobile phones, everything that is related with face recognition, everything that is related with voice recognition, even the AR, the augmented reality things, these are all based on trained models that try to identify planes on in front of our camera to understand where the objects are, and that is almost automatic for the developer. For a developer, it may know nothing about AI, just about 3D coordinates, but it is programming and creating incredible applications on top of this. I can imagine a HoloLens developer creating these experiences, but it doesn't need to know anything about AI. It's there, the SDK. Yeah, it's putting the AI models inside. It's one more component. So in the supply chain, it's yet another component.
Yeah. May I do something crazy on this one? I mean, we
go for it. Go for it.
I hadn't done it yet, so come on. So let me tell you a story. Let me pick up something. I was. There you go. Here's the guitar. This is what I can play. Right? it's really fine, 12 strings.
We are stepping up, okay? Guys, pick your instruments because we are doing different. Go. Sorry.
So I have mine, but those ones aren't real guitars, just for Guitar Hero. But I can go through that one as you want.
I'm just saying. This is my experience in terms of AI recently. So this is a fine 12-string electric guitar, and this is what I can play. And just last week I got the masters for what it's going to be my first solo record. And the record was made with this guitar and a few others there, going through a bunch of effects pedals and amps and so on. But the drumming is all AI.
Oh.
And I'm not going to say the names of programs that I use or plugins, but I could just say, hey, I want these kinds of music. So I want to sound like Cocteau Twins and Sonic Youth and all of those indie late 80s things, and the drummer just adapts to that. And in the end, to have a quick listen at the finished version, it's what we call mastering. There's actually online services now that will do mastering for you, where before you would have to pay for a pro studio to do it.
Yeah.
And for $3 or $4 or $5, you get a mastered version of your track. So in the end, I did go with the studio, mostly because I really wanted to work with that specific person. But that's where technology is in our lives. I was mind blown. Right?
didn't even know that that was there yet. So it's amazing.
Yeah, it's there. It's there, and it's advancing at a much higher rate than most of us are thinking.
Yeah, there's one technology there, but Marco may be the person to talk about it. But GAN networks are able to do amazing transformations once they are trained to do that transformation. Yeah, and you see most of the applications that are very successful nowadays on the social media that do augmented visuals on top of the camera, they are all based on this kind of concepts. So they are picking the mechanical thing that some artists were doing in the past because they were the first, they were doing this manually, a lot of work. But once the machines are trained to do that mechanical part, it is not an advantage anymore because the machine is able to do it quicker and try more things, and then you pick the best one, right? At the end, you're going to be picking which effect is better, which palette is better, which one you like more. And even for that, we are using algorithms to pick the best ones. So we work on real estate, and we do that for photos. So if a vendor is uploading photos, we classify those photos immediately because we have trained algorithms to do that. And how the machine is working, it's a black box. But because it was trained with lots of Google photos and photography contests, it's easy to create a ranking for that, and you can train for that. We don't know why, but it's a rating, and that helps in the business case because it may help the user. The user experience may be better because we are actually actively helping create better listings for those houses, and at the end, it's better, right?
Yeah, and then you can even use the telemetry from the site to feed back into the system.
Yeah.
And then it's not only that you have the general best picture for houses in the world. It may be that the rules for houses in Algarve is different than for houses in Porto. We don't know. And then we don't really know the criteria. We cannot plan that in advance, but the models will discover it and will be the ones that will be presenting this information to the customer, the users in the proper way. Yeah.
Tastes and options is always a dynamic world, right? And it will change with the age of the customer, situation, context, whatever. There's a lot of variables there that can help fit. And as you said, what the user did after, if he selected, if he changed the solution from the computer, that is also a new data point that we may use in the future for retraining. Yeah, this is it's getting more and more complicated, and one of the challenges here is what if these machines become so powerful that what will be next, right? What problems will come with quantum computing, as Susanna was asking you?
Yeah.
Well, there is a previous one, which is, and this is something where Microsoft has invested a lot, which is what is the responsible use of AI, right? So you need to, like, if you are doing this, like, this is not a drill. This is very, very serious things. So you need to make sure that you are actively identifying risks in terms of, like, for example, diversity and inclusion. So what happens if you are taking away all the photos that would be loved by a particular race or by a particular culture, right? So you need to be super careful about that. And like there is even a training on the Microsoft website about those topics, right? And it's very, very important.
Yeah.
And then
I know because every time I go to the US, I get stopped at the airport. So my photo has something or my name in those algorithms, and so my friends know that they have to wait for me half an hour every time.
Yeah, so exactly. There is an algorithm that is probably
Yeah, bias. Of course, it's bias because
the funny thing is, well, funny or not funny, is you're not the only person I know that
yeah.
have this problem, right? So I know many people. So
I do have
it,
the same problem, to be honest.
well, many people get stopped at the airport, right? That is
Okay.
No,
okay.
every time,
Fair enough.
every time it's up. It's randomly.
Yeah. Random.
You can't go every time it be random.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, and then we have like you raised a very good point from the questions, which is about quantum computing, right?
Yeah.
And how
Gonna introduce that topic.
yeah,
Your next rig will be based on quantum computing, and we'll do everything. You just have to feel it. It will
Even
play
programming
best music.
changed, right? Even how you code and how you do everything. If you think about the paradigm in quantum is well, we've been talking about paradigm shifts in terms of architecture, in terms of underlying technology, and then what we see in the future is something that's and okay for organizations is like huge. I remember when I was moved in to London and working in London. It was when the cloud started really picking up, and I was doing a migration that was so intense that basically was rewriting everything. And for the organization that I was working for at the time, this was what made sense. But I was talking with other colleagues in London and at that time and saying, okay, not everybody is doing that shift yet. And it was like 6-7 years ago. But okay, at that time, it was early and it was huge, but it was the same thing. I remember thinking about how you architect and how you're doing the re-architect. There were no Kubernetes, there were nothing like that, and it was just been talking about a huge architectural change. But if we scale that to the problem at hand, it's continue to be the same things, the same, well, different languages, but the same principles of programming. And but when you go into quantum, and this is in the foreseeable future, right? It changes a lot again. And I don't know how you see this. And Juanjo, I would love to hear your thoughts. You're introducing the topic, and to answer also, I think Susanna was the one that brought up the quantum topic. How you see this change? How companies will cope with this?
So I think we must be honest. So until now in the conversation, I feel that I control what is happening. I mean, AI is mind blowing, but I know what is happening. So yeah. I land in a meeting and I understand every word, and I can meet with any of my business friends and I can tell them what is happening. I can explain, I can ask them questions, and I can give them a way forward. With quantum, I must be honest, I understand the technology behind as much as I can. I've been reading, I am following the topic. I'm still not 100% sure that I understand all the implications. That is the first thing. I mean, this is the level of the change we see, right? So this is the level of the change. It's like this one of these breakers that will change many paradigms. And then at some point, there may be a situation that it's going to be so different that really you need to stop and pause and understand what's happening, because something new popped up in front of you. This question, I said one sentence once in one of these dinners with my friends, and they keep on asking me, are my passwords still good? Because I told them at some point all the security of the internet is going to be blown away, and probably we will notice in a bad way, because someone will have access to everything suddenly, right? Because they're gonna decrypt every certificate in the world like this. So that is the level, and you see news here and there that they're claiming quantum supremacy. Still, lots of work in front of us. It's not going to happen tomorrow. Cross my fingers, but it's happening. I mean, and it's happening in our lifetimes. So it's going to be there.
Yeah.
Once it happens, there are going to be some problems, some kinds of problems that are going to go through a complete different process. And it will require everyone to keep, as you said, because you said exactly that, is we will start learning again, learning over many cases, learning from scratch.
Yeah.
And cryptography is one.
Yeah.
Every cybersecurity is one, and that is going to be the most evident. And nobody will guarantee today that at some point half of a country will be re-encrypted without any notice. This may happen, and that is super concerning, of course.
Yeah.
But it goes to like many topics in terms of researchers. If I were a researcher, I would be looking at this very closely, because one day the way I do calculations for my area of expertise may change completely, and may, like, this person in the other side of the room that invested her or his time on that may have a tool that makes that person go 100 times faster in the research. This will happen. So it's not a question of if will happen, it's a question of
When
and to who will happen.
Yeah, for sure, Juan. Zito, and I know that you love to be on top of these emerging topics. And what's your take on how this quantum will change the way we, as developers and then as IT professionals, are working?
Well, the thing is, not everyone is prepared for change, right? But it's inevitable, and what we need to train our people is to deal with change. So the challenge here is preparing people for the culture of continuous learning, continuous improvement, and how to deal with those investments. It's very difficult. You can't just give someone a learning path, a curriculum, and say that you need to train for that. There's way more things on top of that. There's a cost of opportunity of spending that time. Could it be doing anything better? Could that be the wrong technology? Should it be doing another one? What's the motivation for that person? If that person was on the top of her career, is that the right move to put it back to study something from zero? How that person will deal with that challenge? So the thing here, the challenge, at least for me, is trying to find the right culture for people to deal with change, and how you can divide your time in a way that you can do some part of your work is investment, and it's researching, and it's failing, learning to fail, learning to learn from that failures, and how you can deal with that and keep experimenting and seize the opportunity, because there's a lot of opportunities on new technology, on emerging technology, and that's a topic here, right? We need to prepare our people to discover these opportunities. They cannot be working 16 hours a day on the same thing, because after a couple of years, their job will not exist, right? So we need to help them understand how these emerging technologies will influence their customers, their family, their work, their workplace, as we saw this year, right? The work changed, right? The new offices are in our homes.
Yeah, exactly.
No one thought this would change this quickly. So we have to deal with all these problems. And technology is most of the times part of the solution, but we cannot forget that to drive this technology, we need people that are open for change, that are looking at this not as the end of the world, but as an opportunity to do other things, to do better things. I know there's a lot of people that don't want to go back to the office again, right? Yeah. So there was some panic at the beginning, but now some of them.
It's a new normal.
This is better, right? So the time I spent on the car, I miss my podcasts. I miss them.
Yeah, exactly.
But the rest, no.
Yeah.
Right? So we will find new ways. I think even with quantum computing, there's a lot of risks, but there's a lot of opportunity for sure. And we need to prepare our people for that, and we need to help them find those motivations, right? I hope this kind of session will also help them see the opportunities with Kubernetes. Right, Ricardo?
Very good.
Right. You know, I part of my job is sometimes telling customers and partners, look, maybe Kubernetes is not for you.
And you hate that
so-
part.
No, I don't.
Just kidding.
But let's take this quantum thing and just look back at 10 years ago. 10 years ago, the mobile phone wasn't that mainstream. Right?
On 10,
10,
Mobile
12
phone, you're
years
talking
ago.
smartphones probably, right?
Smartphones, sorry. Smartphones.
yes.
Right? Wasn't that mainstream.
At least for
But nowadays, if I see like my 3-year-old, every single screen that he sees, he wants to touch it, right? And if it does not react, like his brain will not understand. This is a screen, not something you can touch, right? So it's evolution, and quantum will be the same. We'll deal with it once we need to. It seems scary. It will bring a lot of challenges, but we can deal with it, right? And the same with, I was on a conference some time ago when we could travel, so that was more than a year ago. But there was a correlation between smartphone usage. That's why I got the smartphone usage. So smartphone usage and depression. And they are exactly the same.
Really?
Right? And I was mind blown.
Me too.
Because, you know, the world is changing. It's changing faster than ever. Zeto just mentioned, you know, remote working and COVID, and now quantum is coming, and AI is getting more intelligent, and so on. So I want to take this to the next topic, which is how do we deal with this, and how do we skill, you know, both technically and on a personal level, to be able to deal with this, because we need to address both topics, right? The technology side of things, but also the organizational culture kind of part and the people part, because or else there will be a lot of challenges for everyone.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, by the way, I was listening to your example, and I think the natural tendency for most people is to establish an order that people is depressed because they're using mobile. And I was thinking that maybe it's the other way around. Maybe they are depressed, they don't want to talk to people, and they're using their mobile because of that.
As
Or
a consequence.
yes, we don't know if this is a cause or a consequence, and this would require a good data model to discover, right? To understand, to be able to clean the data. I think and we see many situations like that, right? So we see signs and we see things, and it's difficult to understand what is the real cause. In terms of the change, I always think that the technical change is good for humanity, but it's kind of neutral for one particular human. So it may be good or bad, depending on many topics. And I think it's very important that people is expecting the change and is understanding the change that is coming as much as possible, so they can have a positive reaction to the change, and it's going to be better for that particular person. I think that's super important. I think there is a responsibility, and I think the owners and the management for the companies we work on in the industry in general, I think they are aware, and they are trying to do an effort on skilling people and make people more digital and more prepared for what is coming. But I think it's a very important topic socially that I don't know if every country is taking the right steps. Everybody's saying, every country is saying that they're taking the right steps. I don't know if the steps are properly taken in reality. That is the the part that could be a bit concerning. But I think it depends a lot on the way you frame the information for the people and the way you treat people as adults, so they make their own decisions, but they have all the information at hand. And that makes a change in the way people really react to technology. If we make it complicated on the framing, it may be complicated or it may not be complicated. The artist that is working with HoloLens, as Zeto was describing before, probably was very concerned about AI at some point. And then when learned to use the HoloLens and the AI system on HoloLens, it was not only in her or his detriment, but was given like a precious gift of a tool that is
It's a tool, yeah.
Is augmenting the human capacities of this person. So the human creativity has a new level of ability to express, right? So I think that those examples are super good. And I think we should look for, as the digital sector, we need to look for those examples and be like conservative in a sense. So we need to make sure people understand there is some change and they need to go through the change. But at the same point, I think we need to focus on the humans and make sure that we frame these tools as tools for the humans to use. And we need to take responsibility for making that easy to use. I remember this conversation in the school with the mother of the mother of someone of my like some classmate of my kids saying, "Oh, these folks, these kids, they really know about computers because they're using their iPads." And I was telling them, and I replied, "No, they fortunately they have iPads, so they don't need to learn how to use computers." Right? Because using a computer is something different. So those things will come, right? iPads, the iPadization of things will come, and we need to accelerate that as much as possible so everybody can use the technology. I think that's super important.
And Zeto, about the skilling and just picking up on that, what do you think that and you're in at DevScope you need to think about how you're gonna keep on updating the team and how this is an important topic for sure. So how do you feel that this is moving forward? What's the big change? How do you guys keep up?
Well, we try to do a lot of activities without impacting the business, of course, because we have bills to pay, right? But we try to use these opportunities to grow the talent also, right? And this can be very useful, for example, in scenarios where you have a lot of ideas, but you don't have time to go after all of them. And so we can do a lot of things with this. This kind of backlog of spikes that we need to work on to validate something, we can use a lot of things from time the senior guys have, or if they don't have the time, at least arrange some sort of a research internship for a student to work on that topic and work with the senior guy to work on that scenarios. There's a lot of activities that you can do on a daily basis that can help us create those insights, research outcomes. So we do a lot of those mini projects, and we try to mix different skills to try to understand if that scenario is valuable or not. Mm-hmm. So sometimes we start with something that we don't know if it's possible, but the idea is to spend some time there and learn more with that. And this is something that we do typically with people inside the company. But in the current scenario, I think we are in a flat world, right? We have resources everywhere in the world, and Helder here in the chat is doing a lot of interesting posts. Mm-hmm. So I want to pick on one of his.
Sure.
that was related to the data labeling industry. That's actually one of the workloads we have. Once we start working with AI, we have to do a lot of labeling, right? We have to at least check if the data we are using for training is correct. Which scenarios gave us false positives, whatever. You have to do a lot of labeling, and that's very expensive for a developer. And what the industry is doing, it's outsourcing most of this work, and which means that we are moving data, and we are allowing probably, as Elder was saying here, low cost, lower income countries to do this kind of work. We are probably sending data there that we shouldn't send to those countries or to those companies or to those, we don't know what's on the other side. So there's a lot of things here related to the new workforce. But I think this is not about the problem of, oh, we are using low-income people to do this. This is happening on all levels because our high-skilled developers are being used for something else, for an American company that is outsourcing some work to us. So this happens on all levels. Some are selling, some are buying. The world is flat, right? And we have to understand this. Our organizations are not anymore bounded by the corporate limits, right? The VPN, the network. It's not like that anymore. We are working from home, so there's no corporate network. There's no IPsec security, Wi-Fi, whatever certificate to use the Wi-Fi. No, forget it. We are all working remotely. So in this new world, there's opportunities. And yes, we need governance. We need to make sure that we are not abusing of any human, right, to build the sneakers or to build algorithms, right? It's the same thing. It's the industry that and governance that needs to be in place, and we need to respect that and make sure that we are not building systems that will enslave us, right? As for example, the social media now is figuring out that what they are actually doing with it, all these likes,
data,
they are creating slaves that need to reinforcement to feel good, right? Where actually they are going into a depression without knowing it. So we have to be careful what we are building, but at the same time, we just need to respect our principles and try to leverage the best in humankind and solve the problems, because we have a lot of them, right?
Yeah. Great message. Very strong
definitely.
message.
Definitely. We are reaching the end, so 2 minutes to go. I want to thank you so much for this. I mean, this could go on forever, this panel. We will have so much talked about. We started, in serverless and hybrid, and now in quantum and AI and things. I really enjoyed it. I hope the audience did as well. So in just 30 seconds, each of you, a final thought that you want to share with the audience. Wahoo, want to start?
You're muted, Wango. Sorry. It had to happen once. It had to happen.
Sorry about that. It was me. Yeah, so really appreciate the fact that you invited. I really enjoyed the conversation and your sharing insights with you. I think Kubernetes is there. It's going to be there. Automation is there. It's going to be there. And it's going to go more and more into our daily lives, even if we don't notice it sometimes, right? It's going to change AI, and it's going to allow us to do AI at more scale, and that's going to change many of the applications we are developing every day. So really looking forward to all of this and enjoying the process. I'm hoping to keep the conversation with you on future events, or maybe when we can travel again. So looking forward to it.
Thank you. Zeta?
I just want to add that we are enjoying all these conversations. please keep those comments coming. I will be glad to discuss these topics. It's my job anyway, so like Ricardo, I enjoy these technologies and how to use them. So keep those questions coming. Hope a lot of people have the opportunity to stop and attend events like this one, and think outside their boxes and see a little bit of what can be the future, right? We cannot guess, but maybe we can add some ideas to the mix and let people find their way, their path, right?
Yeah. So true.
So,
Thank you so much.
I would just like to thank everybody as well, because it was, I really had fun. If nothing else, hopefully we inspired many people, but if nothing else, we had a lot of fun in this conversation. So
yes,
thank you guys.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.